The executioner's sword catches the gray Belgian light, but the hand gripping it doesn't belong to a stranger. It belongs to her father. Princess Dymphna of Ireland, 15 years old, kneels on cold ground with her hands bound. The priest who helped her escape lies murdered 3 meters away, his blood still spreading across cobblestone. Before her stands King Damon, her own father, his face twisted into something that might have been grief once, but has curdled into something monstrous over 2 years of obsessive pursuit. He tracked her across the Irish Sea, through foreign ports, into this small Belgian town, not to punish a runaway daughter, but to reclaim what he believes belongs to him. A bride, a replacement for the wife he lost. His daughter, transformed in his shattered mind into his property, his right, his destiny. And even now, with the blade at her throat, even knowing death is seconds away, Dymphna's answer remains the same. No, this isn't the sanitized saint story you'll find in church pamphlets. This is the brutal truth preserved in 13th century manuscripts, pieced together from testimonies too terrifying to speak aloud. Before we descend into this medieval nightmare, hit that subscribe button and smash the like if you want more hidden histories that reveal the dark truths behind the saints we thought we knew. Because what you're about to discover is how a teenage girl's desperate flight from incestuous obsession became one of history's most powerful stories of resistance. How her refusal to submit, even unto death, transformed her into the patron saint of mental illness. Dark irony, considering the madness that pursued her, and why for over 1,400 years her story has drawn millions seeking solace from psychological torment. Because Dymphna's tale reveals a truth that powerful men have always wanted buried. Sometimes the greatest threat to a young woman comes from inside her own home, and sometimes the only escape is martyrdom itself. Now let's go back to where this horror began, in the stone halls of an Irish castle where a little girl was learning to hide more than one dangerous secret. The year is 618 AD. In the stone halls of King Damon's court in Northern Ireland, two worlds collide with deadly consequences. The king rules with the iron fist of ancient pagan tradition. Blood sacrifices mark the changing seasons. Druids read omens in crow flights and entrails. Warriors pledge their souls to gods whose names Christian lips dare not speak aloud. But behind the closed doors of Queen Odilla's private chambers, a different reality exists. Gentle prayers rise to a crucified god, and a little girl named Dymphna learns to trace the sign of the cross when nobody's watching. This double life isn't just spiritually dangerous, it's physically lethal. One overheard prayer, one glimpsed hidden crucifix, could mean death for mother and daughter both. Queen Odilla had been Christian before her political marriage to Damon, forced to hide her faith like a dagger beneath silk. Every single day, she wakes knowing that discovery means execution, not just for herself, but for the child she's secretly raising in forbidden faith. The Vita Sanctae, written by Peter of Cambrai in 1247, preserves fragments of testimonies that survived 7 centuries. Young Dymphna grows between these two worlds, like a flower reaching for light through cracked stone. By day, she sits beside her father's throne, watching druids perform rituals that make her mother's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on hers. She learns to keep her face carefully blank as blood spatters sacred stones, masters the art of being present but invisible. By night, in her mother's chambers, she becomes someone else entirely. Father Giraberne, the queen's confessor, who arrived disguised as a traveling scholar, teaches her Latin prayers and tells her stories of martyrs who chose death over denying God. But something is growing in the shadows that will make those martyrs' sufferings seem almost merciful by comparison. The political importance of royal daughters in 7th century Ireland cannot be overstated. Dymphna is currency, her virgin body a treaty waiting to be signed, her womb a political alliance in embryo. Archaeological excavations in 1949 confirmed the violence of this world through shattered skulls and hastily buried remains. The king has no idea what's happening in his own household, how his wife is preparing their daughter for a different kingdom entirely, but childhood's protective veil is about to be torn away. Because when Queen Odila dies and grief shatters King Daemon's mind, the secret Christian princess will become the target of an obsession so twisted that fleeing across the sea won't be enough to escape it. Queen Odila's death comes with winter's first frost, and the very stones of the castle seem to grow colder with her passing. 3 days after the funeral, King Daemon sits motionless in his throne room, eyes fixed on nothing, while advisors whisper urgently among themselves. The pagan death rituals have been performed. The queen's favorite horse sacrificed. Her treasures burned. But the king refuses to speak, refuses to eat, refuses to acknowledge the world spinning without her. 14-year-old Dymphna kneels beside him, suddenly motherless, trying to offer comfort to a man who seems to have forgotten she exists. When he finally speaks after 72 hours of silence, his first words drop like stones into still water. She's gone. Not profound, not poetic, just those 2 words. But it's how he says them, not with grief's expected softness, but with something harder, angrier, that makes Dymphna's blood run cold. The advisors have a solution that would shock even hardened medieval sensibilities. First, they try conventional remedies. Suitable brides are suggested from neighboring kingdoms, political advantages outlined with careful diplomacy. But Daemon's face twists with each suggestion. His hands clench when they describe young women who could never be what Odila was. As spring arrives without bringing renewal to the king's spirit, the advisors grow desperate. The kingdom needs an heir, needs stability, needs a queen to gentle their increasingly erratic monarch. The whispers start in dark corners. At first, they're so outrageous that even those speaking them can barely believe their own words. One advisor, braver or more foolish than the rest, mentions how much Princess Dymphna resembles her late mother. The silence that follows feels like a held breath before catastrophe. Then King Daemon begins to notice his daughter differently. Where once he saw Odila's echo as painful reminder, now he sees something else. Possibility. The moment everything changes comes one evening when Dymphna brings her father wine. The advisors don't know she understands their dialect, don't see her pause behind the heavy tapestry as one says. She has her mother's face, her mother's grace. The bloodline would remain pure. The cup slips from Dymphna's hands. Wine spreads across stone like spilled blood. That night, she seeks out Father Giriburns in his chambers, terror making her voice shake as she repeats what she heard. The old priest's face drains of color. He begins making quiet inquiries about passage to Britain, to Gaul, anywhere beyond a mad king's reach. But the trap is already closing. And what comes next will transform father-daughter bond into hunter-prey pursuit that crosses seas and ends in blood. King Daemon's campaign begins with gifts. Jewels that once adorned Queen Odila appear in Dymphna's chambers. Gowns cut in styles too mature for a 14-year-old girl. His eyes follow her at every meal, lingering in ways that make her skin crawl. He insists she sit in her mother's chair at feasts. When she protests, he rages. When she complies, he smiles with satisfaction that feels like violation. The entire court watches this grotesque dance, too terrified to intervene. Recently digitized manuscripts reveal the sophistication of Daemon's delusion. He begins referring to Dymphna by her mother's name, violently correcting anyone who uses her given name. State documents from this period show his increasing isolation. Allied kings stop visiting. Trade agreements go unsigned. The kingdom itself seems to recoil from the wrongness emanating from its throne. Dymphna's secret baptism at 14 takes on desperate new significance. Previously a spiritual milestone, now it becomes armor against her father's intentions. Her vow of chastity, sworn to Father Garaburns and God alone, transforms from personal devotion to desperate shield. She stops dining in the Great Hall, claiming illness, bars her chamber door at night, surrounds herself with servants, never allowing herself alone with the man who gave her life. The king interprets resistance as challenge, modesty as coyness. Archaeological evidence from this period shows renovations to the royal quarters, new passages constructed between chambers. Was he already planning easier access to his daughter's rooms? The moment when possibility becomes certainty arrives during the spring festival. King Damon approaches his daughter with strange formality before the assembled court. "The kingdom needs a queen," he announces, loud enough for all to hear, "and I have found her." His hand reaches for Dymphna's, and in that touch, she feels her childhood end forever. The court holds its breath as she pulls away, as she dares to say, "Father, I cannot be what you wish. Please remember who you were. Remember who I am. Your daughter, not your wife. Your child, not your queen." The rage that flashes across his face tells her everything. There will be no reasoning with madness. That night, Father Garaburns works frantically, selling church treasures to fund escape, identifying loyal servants willing to flee, planning routes that avoid the king's allies. The final straw comes when Damon announces their betrothal publicly, setting a date just weeks away. On a moonless night, when the king's intentions can no longer be denied or deflected, Dymphna makes the only choice left. She will trade everything she has ever known for the slim hope of freedom across dark waters. But some chains, it seems, can stretch across any distance. Midnight at the dock. Every creak of wet wood beneath Dymphna's feet feels like a scream in the darkness. The boat is smaller than she imagined, barely large enough for 5 souls brave enough to flee. Father Garaburns grips her elbow, his hands trembling with age and fear. The queen's former lady-in-waiting clutches provisions. The court jester, loyal beyond his role, takes the oars. A young servant who loved Odia like his own helps cast off the ropes. Each face reflects the same truth. There's no returning from this journey. Harbor guards patrol in predictable patterns. Father Garaburns spent weeks learning, bribing some, drugging others' wine. But someone saw them leave through the kitchen gardens. A shadow at a window that might have been nothing, might have been everything. The crossing takes 4 days in brutal March winds. Salt spray soaks through wool and leather, chilling them to bone. Dymphna bails water with cupped hands, her princess fingers learning the rough work of survival. Father Garaburns prays continuously beneath wind and wave. But here's what will doom them all. The coins sewn into Dymphna's cloak hem. Irish currency carries distinctive markings, the king's seal, Celtic knots unique to each minting. Every transaction leaves a trail. Every gold piece tells a story. She spends her father's gold to escape her father's madness, not knowing each coin is a breadcrumb leading him straight to her. They arrive at Antwerp, bedraggled and exhausted, then move inland to the town of Giel, small enough to hide in, large enough to disappear within. Dymphna transforms from frightened refugee into something unexpected, a healer of souls. The gold that funded escape now builds a small hospital, a sanctuary for those whose minds have slipped their moorings. The irony cuts deep. The daughter who fled madness now tends its victims. She holds the hands of women who scream at invisible demons, and in their eyes recognizes her father's torment. For 2 years, she builds routines that feel like safety. Morning prayers. Days spent tending the mentally afflicted. Evenings teaching local children their letters. The townspeople know her as Dymphna, the healer, never questioning the sadness shadowing her eyes or the way she startles at unexpected sounds. But those Irish coins have a way of finding their way home, carrying stories with them. A Flemish merchant visits Cork, pays for wool with distinctive gold. The coins reach a money changer who recognizes their mark, who mentions them to a court official, who whispers in the king's ear. And suddenly, Dymphna's sanctuary is about to become her execution ground. The first sign comes 6 months after their arrival in Geel. Dymphna is in the market when she sees him, an Irish merchant with red beard and familiar accent. He doesn't recognize her beneath simple local dress, her noble bearing hidden under practiced humility, but he handles coins at a merchant's stall, examining their marks with professional interest. Irish gold, he muses aloud, and recent minting. Strange to see so much so far from home. Her blood turns to ice. King Damon hadn't dimmed his cunning with madness. He'd focused it with terrifying intensity. Every Irish trader leaving port carries questions alongside cargo. Have you seen refugees? A young woman of noble bearing? An elderly priest? Gold coins with these particular markings? The net tightens while Dymphna remains oblivious in her sanctuary. Numismatic evidence reveals these specific coins, silver pennies, and gold tremises bearing Damon's marks, circulating through Flemish markets during this exact period. The money that saves also dooms. Every charitable act funded by Irish gold leaves another trace for hunters to follow. A merchant mentions the generous foreign lady to a traveling priest, who mentions it to a colleague, who writes to a bishop, who has connections to Irish nobility. The web of information tightens, invisible, around them. Father Gerburns notices first more Irish merchants in Geel's market asking specific questions. The jester reports strangers at the inn inquiring about foreign nobility. Dymphna's lady-in-waiting sees unfamiliar faces at Mass, their eyes scanning congregants rather than focusing on the Eucharist. Those final weeks in Geel carry the weight of impending storm. Dymphna dreams of her mother nightly, wakes calling her name. Father Gereburns ages visibly, his prayers taking on desperate urgency. Hidden monastery records show his final letters, appeals to bishops for sanctuary, to abbeys for shelter. But institutional protection requires time, political maneuvering, careful negotiation. Madness moves faster than bureaucracy. Those Irish coins stamped with her homeland's mark had seemed like practical necessity when sewn into her cloak. Now they gleam like bloody breadcrumbs, leading the wolf straight to her door. The sanctuary she built stone by stone, prayer by prayer, is about to become an altar for the sacrifice she fled across an ocean to avoid. Because King Damon has finally found what madness convinced him belongs to him, and he's coming to claim it. Dawn breaks over Geel with the sound of thunder. Too many hoofbeats for ordinary travelers. 40 mounted warriors in Irish armor ride through narrow streets, their leaders bearing unmistakable even through morning mist. King Damon has found his daughter. 2 years of careful hiding, of rebuilt life, of desperate hope, shattered by his presence in the town square below her window. His first words are not what anyone expects. "Bring me my queen." Father Gereburns bursts through Dymphna's door moments later, his aged face white with terror. But she's already pulling on her simplest dress, trying to transform from noblewoman to nobody. Too late for disguises. The innkeeper, eager for reward or terrified of punishment, has already pointed out her residence. Boots thunder on stairs, voices speaking Irish Gaelic after 2 years of Flemish and Latin. Her mother tongue sounds like a curse now. The door splinters beneath, mailed fists. Warriors flood her small chamber, eyes avoiding hers. Even hardened soldiers feel shame at their mission. Then Damon enters, and Dymphna sees what 2 years of obsession have wrought. Her father has aged a decade. Hair more gray than gold, face gaunt with hunger that food cannot satisfy. But his eyes burn with terrible purpose as they find her. Dymphna, he breathes, using her name for the first time in years. My wayward daughter, my reluctant bride, did you think the sea could keep us apart? He approaches slowly, drinking in her appearance like a man dying of thirst. You're more beautiful than ever. He reaches to touch her face. She flinches away, and his expression hardens. Still playing the shy maiden. 2 years haven't cured you of this foolish resistance. Dymphna's response seals all their fates. I am a bride of Christ, Father. I cannot be yours in the way you desire. Please remember who you were. Remember who I am. Your daughter, not your wife. Your child, not your queen. Each word falls like a stone into silence. Rage builds in his face like storm clouds gathering. He strikes her hard enough to send her sprawling. Father Greburnus cries out in protest, and the king turns on the priest with volcanic fury. You poisoned her against me, filled her head with Christian nonsense about sin and virtue, as if anything natural between man and woman could be sin. What happens next occurs with brutal efficiency. Forensic analysis of the burial site reveals the truth. The king draws his sword. Dymphna scrambles to her feet, trying to throw herself between blade and priest. But soldiers hold her back. As Damon advances on the elderly man who's been more father to her than the one who shares her blood. And the only sound is steel meeting flesh, and Dymphna's screams echoing off stone walls that have seen too much blood this morning. Father Greburnus dies without final words. The sword ensures that. But his eyes find Dymphna's in that last moment, offering absolution for survival, blessing for whatever comes next. The loyal servants who fled with her 2 years ago scream, but their cries cut short as soldiers fulfill orders. No witnesses, the king commanded. None but my reluctant bride. Now Dymphna stands alone with 40 warriors and a mad king, her protector's blood still warm on rough wooden floors. Damon circles her like a wolf studying prey, his sword dripping red testimony to how far he's fallen. Now, he says conversationally, as if murder hasn't just shattered morning quiet, will you come willingly, or must I drag you home in chains? The choice feels like none at all, but Dymphna makes it anyway. I will never consent to this abomination, she declares, voice steady despite trembling body. Kill me if you must, but I will not sin against God and nature by becoming your wife. The king's final rage transcends anything human. He grabs her by the hair, dragging her toward the door while she struggles and prays. Then he stops at the threshold, breathing hard. For an instant, she sees her father trapped behind the monster's eyes. Please, he whispers, and now he's the one begging. Your mother is gone. You're all I have left of her. Can't you understand? I need you. The kingdom needs you. Just say yes, and all this ends. Dymphna refuses again. She speaks of duty to God, of horror at his proposition, of love for the father he used to be and revulsion for what he's become. Each word cuts him, but none cut deep enough to excise the madness. Modern psychiatrists note how fixation narrows reality until only obsession remains. King Damon cannot hear her words. He hears only rejection of his twisted love, denial of his desperate need. The sword rises again, this time aimed at the daughter who dares defy a king's will. Dymphna faces her end with courage that converts even hardened warriors to tears. Kneeling in prayer, she forgives her father, commends her soul to God, and prepares for paradise. The blow, when it comes, is almost merciful in its swiftness. Archaeological evidence confirms a single clean strike. Even in madness, a warrior's training holds. Her head falls beside Father Greburnus's, her blood mingling with his on foreign soil that will become sacred through sacrifice. But death, as it often does with saints, is only the beginning. The immediate aftermath unfolds in eerie silence. King Damon stands over his daughter's body, sword hanging loose in suddenly strengthless fingers. The madness that sustained him through pursuit and violence drains away, leaving only devastating clarity. He sees what he's done. Not reclaimed a bride, murdered his child. Some accounts claim he tried to raise her body, to breathe life back into still lips. Others say he simply walked away, leaving gold to bury what his obsession destroyed. But all agree on one detail. The king who arrived in terrible purpose left as a broken shell, his mind shattered beyond what even madness could sustain. The blood had barely dried on Gil's cobblestones when the first pilgrim arrived, drawn by whispers of the virgin martyr who died rather than yield to madness. The miracles began almost immediately, defying rational explanation. Within hours of Dimphna's burial, a young woman, catatonic since her husband's death, suddenly spoke. The princess stands beside Christ, crowned with light. The man who believed demons lived in his chest felt them flee. The girl who hadn't spoken since childhood, trauma-formed words of prayer. By sunset, 5 souls touched by madness claimed restoration at her grave. Within weeks, the trickle became a flood. They arrived from across Flanders and beyond. Parents carrying children whose minds had slipped anchor, spouses supporting partners lost to melancholy's depths, elderly souls seeking relief from dementia's approach. Modern psychiatrists note the psychological power of hope concentrated in sacred space, but can placebo effect explain the merchant who arrives raving and leaves reasoning? The mother who stops trying to harm her children? The soldier who finally sleeps without battle terrors? Gil itself transformed around her memory. The town developed a revolutionary approach to mental illness. Instead of locking away the afflicted, townspeople took them into their homes, integrated them into daily life. Farmers taught disturbed souls to tend crops. Merchants employed those struggling with reality. Families adopted adults whose minds wandered strange paths. This informal foster system, born from Dimphna's example of compassionate care, continues today. In 2019 alone, over 25,000 visited her shrine. The town's psychiatric hospital, opened in 1850, built on centuries of community-based treatment, inspired by a refugee who spent her father's gold on others' healing. 1 in 4 Gil families today host someone with mental illness, where psychiatric patients work alongside lifelong residents. The medieval example shapes 21st century treatment. But here's what makes Dimphna's story truly devastating and eternally relevant. This wasn't aberration. For centuries, this pattern functioned openly across medieval Europe. The corruption of protective love into possessive obsession, fathers viewing daughters as replaceable wives, patriarchal authority claiming ownership over female bodies. The specifics change. Royal courts become suburban homes. Swords become guns. Public execution becomes private murder-suicide. But the fundamental horror remains. A father who cannot accept his daughter's autonomy, who views her rejection as wound to his authority, who would rather destroy what he cannot control. Every year, thousands of young women flee homes where parental love has curdled into obsession, where protectors become predators. They recognize themselves in Dimphna's flight, her refusal, her sacrifice. The irony of her patronage cuts deepest of all. Patron saint of mental illness, murdered by madness. Some church authorities argued this made her inappropriate as intercessor. How can one killed by insanity protect against it? But the faithful understood what scholars missed. Dimphna knew madness intimately, suffered its ultimate consequence, yet maintained sanity and sanctity unto death. Who better to invoke against demons of the mind than one who faced them in their most terrible form and refused to yield? Beyond mental illness, she's become unofficial patron of those fleeing family violence, particularly incestuous abuse. The story resonates across centuries because the horror remains contemporary. Her narrative forces confrontation with Christianity's dark reality. Holiness often grows in horror's shadow. Dimphna is every daughter who said no and paid the ultimate price. Her sainthood transforms her from victim to guardian, offering solace to those battling demons in their own minds or in their own homes. She reminds us that survival isn't always possible, but resistance always matters. That sometimes the only victory against madness is refusing to let it win your soul. So here's my challenge to you. Not abstract, not philosophical, specific. If you know someone fleeing family violence, if you see warning signs of possessive obsession disguised as love, If you recognize the patterns Dymphna faced in contemporary relationships, speak up. Break the silence that enables horror. Share this video so others understand that these medieval nightmares still happen today, just wearing modern clothing. Leave Dymphna's name in the comments to honor every daughter throughout history who chose martyrdom over submission to abuse. Because the greatest threat to powerful predators has always been people refusing to look away. Will you be one of those people, or will you scroll past, comfortable in the illusion that Dymphna's story belongs safely in the distant past? The choice, as always, is yours, but so is the consequence of that choice.